Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much again, Dr. Amelia and Mr. Omar, for the opportunity to present my work and how relevant it might be to ADIA lab. So, in today's presentation, I will have a look at the relevance of laboratory finance in the investment setting. So, my name again is Farouk Abdul-Salam, and you can have a look at my profile here. I'm an economist and a senior data scientist. So, in today's presentation, which, as I mentioned earlier, looks at the relevance of laboratory finance, I'll start by looking at the introduction. Setting the pace, explaining what laboratory finance is, and then have a look at its relevance, its implementation, and those who happen to use it, including investment agencies like ADIA Lab, and its application. And I'll give a real world example using one of the seminars that we had from the symposium that was held last week by ADIA Lab. And I'll give additional insight and conclusion as to why this topic is going to be super relevant within the investment setting and for ADIA Lab. So, what is an experimental finance? It's essentially a subfield of finance where we simulate some of the problems that we have in a real world in a laboratory setting. So, we sort of break down the problem in a laboratory setting and ask participants to make decisions and for us to see whether some of our theories really matches with what we see in the lab and what can be seen outside as well. So this is more or less an experimental setting, but seeks to solve most of the financial related problems. So you can call it laboratory finance, you can call it experimental finance, computational finance in some respects as well, where we compare what we've seen in the real world versus what we see in the laboratory setting. So as could be seen here, it sort of bridges the gap between theoretical finance and the real world behavior that is seen, and it's mostly a controlled lab experiment setting. I'll give an example for us to really understand how it has been used. Now, how relevant is this? This is going to be very, very relevant in our case, especially given the fact that we are interested in understanding human behavior. So, whenever you have such a problem and you really want to understand whether individuals are making decisions based on the return or based on the risk, and how do they manage both trade-offs? This is just an example. This laboratory finance will give you an insight to it, and this is what we call the behavioral insight. So, as also, in terms of the market dynamics, trying to predict economic outcomes and what have you, this laboratory finance can give you a head start to get to see what's going to happen. Now, when you develop a tool or when you develop a product and you really want to launch it, be it a bank, be it an investment agency, and you want to see how are people going to welcome this. The very first thing you probably might want to do is to put it in a laboratory setting, get to see what the impact is within the laboratory before you even launch it. To do that, laboratory finance is gonna help you do that. And also policy making decisions whenever you have a problem in terms of your policy, how to go about the policy. This is also going to be the very first start. Put it within the laboratory setting, and you get to see the preliminary insight and the preliminary results, and that's going to help you make your decision moving forward. So that's the relevance of experimentary finance. Happy to discuss that further. Now, in terms of how it's been implemented, essentially, you break down the real world problem. If it's an investment related problem, you break it down, you design an experimental setting, an app, then you allow participants to make the decision. This decision is going to be incentive compatible. That is to say, their decision is going to influence whatever they are supposed to get at the end of the experiment. They're going to get some monetary outcome. Then you allow them in, let them make the decision. They perceive themselves to be investors. They make the decisions. Then you gather the data. You make a couple of statistical analysis. Then you tend to see that, hey, this is what I'm seeing in the lab based on this particular problem that I moved to the lab. And I think this is going to give me some preliminary understanding as to what the human agents are going to do in the real world setting. So this is essentially how it's been implemented. So as I mentioned, I'm going to give an example and using the risk return framework. So in terms of who uses it, so it has been used widely, the investment firms and investment agencies, academic institutions. In my case, I used it during my PhD. It was very useful in trying to um, advise government in terms of currency related problems, policymakers, essentially the central banks, for instance. This is also going to be their go-to tool. Financial technology firms within the venture capital frame as well. These are some of the things that you could use. And consulting firms, for sure, they leverage some of these laboratory finance to get deeper understanding before they put out a policy. Now, in terms of how it has been used, as I mentioned, you can use this to look at risk assessment, how people are a bit averse to risk or they are not averse to risk. So in this particular presentation, I will have a look at the risk related problem where I developed the app to walk you through. There are other related problems in terms of behavioral modeling as well. There's also market simulation. You can simulate the market, get to see how individuals make their decision within the simulated market, and gain an insight based on that. In terms of testing a product, you want to test a product, a financial tool or financial product, you put it in the lab, get to see how people in the lab respond to it before you even churn it out. So these are some of the applications as I mentioned, and it's going to be very, very useful. Some of the outcomes that you can get from it, get to see whether your investors are risk averse or risk loving, how the market is, how people are taking the product, how policymakers are taking into account some of the new policies that you are trying to bring. So in today's discussion, I'm going to break the problem in terms of an example of how experimental finance could be leveraged. My problem is going to be motivated by Professor Marco's presentation, where he looked at the whole idea of risk versus return. So, a typical example is you might find an investor who is about to make a decision. He's faced with two products. One product will give him a very high return, but the fact that it's coming with a high return implies that he or she will have a high risk of losing some of his money versus having a low return, but with the low return means that it is safe. So this is going to be a dilemma as the investor is being faced with this trade-off, whether he's going to invest in a safer asset, which will give him a small return, or he's going to invest in a much riskier asset that will give him a higher return. Now, when you are faced with this problem, the very first thing you might want to do is to put the problem in a lab to get to see how individuals are going to make a decision when they are being faced with a risk versus return problem. So let me quickly go to the app that I created where I walk you through an example here. We put the participants in the lab. We create this particular app. We give them the link to make this decision. So this is going to be the introductory page where we give them an understanding as to what they are to expect. Then, for every experiment, you have to get the subject's consent. Without the consent, there's no way we can continue. So let's assume that they've consented to this particular experiment and they've given their name. In this case, I will use my name here, which is Farouk Abdul-Salam. Then they go to the very first page. We explain what they are expected to have. So here they have an amount of money to invest. They can invest in either company A or company B. However, as we mentioned earlier, there is going to be a risk to the investment and there's going to be a return as well. So they get to see that. And also, there is the information that they will receive at the end of each and every investment decision that they make. This is going to be very important as it will help inform their decision-making process. So here, This particular participant, be it a student, be it myself, be it Dr. Amelia, be it Mr. Omar, you are going to act as an investor, and your decision-making process is going to give you points. And this point is going to be translated into real money. So your aim is to be an investor, but make sure you gain enough points, and your points will be translated into money at the end of the experiment, and you tend to use the money for whatever purpose you probably might want to use it for. So here, after this explanation round, where they understand that they are going to act as investors, we then move to the very first round, which is the decision-making round. So they are informed that they have $100 or 100 dirham to make that decision. But there's going to be returns, as I mentioned. So company A, for instance, might have a very low return when compared to company B, but in terms of the safety or risk, company A has lower risk, whilst company B has a much higher risk. Then we then move on to the decision-making process. Now that they are presented with this particular problem, how are they going to make their decision? Let's imagine, like in my case, I'm sort of risk loving. I might go like, okay, I'll just put more money in the one that might give me a higher return and put the rest of my money, which is 25. At the end of the day, 25 plus 75 will add up to my 100 dirham. Okay, this is going to be my decision. Maybe Dr. Amelia, your decision will be different, and Mr. Kipti, your decision will be different as well. Then, for us as the experimental lab researchers, we are interested in picking up what informed their decision. So, in this case, maybe I would say I'm risk loving, and I want to get uh, more returns. So maybe that's the reason why I went this way. So when they finish making this decision, they then click on this guy here. Then we tell them whatever decision that they've made while they await their results. So at the background, the app I created is computing their results for them for the next round. Then as soon as they click on the next, then this is the results of their investment. This is the information they had earlier. This is the amount they invested. This is the profit from the investment by investing in company A. And this is the return from that in company B. This is the amount they were able to accumulate, and this is the total. So at the end of the day, they get their outcome and they get to see how much they've earned. Maybe this particular guy earned 8 dirham extra from this investment, which is here. Then they make their comment as to what they've seen. Okay, so good. Yeah, an example, just to pick up their response. Then they click on next. Then we take a questionnaire, a quick questionnaire. Get to see, okay, what's influenced your overall investment decision? Maybe it might be risk. Then they provide additional feedback. Maybe it's good experiment. Then what is your background? My background is economics. It's very important for us to get to see how different backgrounds tend to influence the decision-making process. Then we ask them, are they available for a group discussion, just so we can sit them down, pick up their brain, and pick up their decision-making process within the experiment. Then they click this, and this will be the end. And we thank them and we give them their money. So this is a typical example of an experiment. I'm happy to discuss further. So when you go back to the slide, this is essentially what you see, the introductory page, the explanation, the decision-making process, whatever they make, the investment decision, the questionnaire, and they tend to get the very final page. So that's an experiment for you. Then we also have to ask ourselves, can we create an AI agent that can help make similar decisions with a higher return using any of our theory? And the answer here is yes. So here I also created an AI agent that can help make such decisions and make those investment decisions appropriate. So for instance, in this case, we ask an AI agent, and which is AI investment app here, Imagine I have $100. Imagine I have asset A that will give me a return of 5% but has a zero risk, whilst asset B will have 25 will have 10% returns, but in terms of its risk is 25. What will be the decision-making process? Now, this is what the AI agent will tell us to make. It will ask us to, let's put almost 49% of our money in the very first good or the first company, and we put 50% in the second company. So as our risk level changes, the amount of money the AI agent will be asking us to put into each and every investment will differ as well. So if we are really, really risk loving, we really love risk a lot, then you realize that the AI agent will tell you, okay, put all your money in the risky side. If we are very, very risk averse, then the AI agent will ask us that we should put our money in the much safer asset. So that's the AI agent that can complement our experimental findings. So this is just the example here. There are other examples that I have in the past. You can access my YouTube video, one on the whole idea of currency change. I also have incentive design experiments where we are looking at how different incentives affect decision-making process. And there is also the whole idea of counterfeit products and how that affects individual decision-making process. So you can click on this and it will take you directly to my YouTube channel and you can get to see an example here as well. So, why do we have to invest in a laboratory experiments like this? For sure, this is going to give us a very deep insight and a competitive advantage as to what our theory is and how that aligns with what we have in the real world setting. We can also, mitigate some of the risk that we have. Innovation-wise, ADIA lab is ahead of the curve. So by having this experimentary laboratory experiment, we will be further ahead of the curve as well. There's also the whole idea that the decision-making process will be more data-driven, and you can even think of it as ADIA lab inviting students over to understand the work that we do. So if this is the case, we can use such experimental setting to further explain to them that these are some of the scenarios that we are faced with. These are some of the decision-making process that we are expected to make, and this is how we can go about it. Just simulate such real-world setting for the student to really understand whatever we have going. So, in conclusion, I really appreciate the opportunity to present this niche idea. I'm available to discuss it further, and I'm looking forward to our discussion and just get to know that laboratory experiment and laboratory finance is going to give us a valuable insight, be it for us, the investors, in better understanding the market. And it's also going to give us something a bit more novel. And I hope with this, we can pick this further. Thanks a lot again, Dr. Amelia and Mr. Omar. I'm looking forward to our discussion and I'm happy to present the app that I created as well, be it the AI app and the experimental app as well during our discussion. Thanks a lot and hope to hear from you. Bye.